Welcome home. In this podcast, we venture into what it means to be a leader in this new world. Human, flawed but working on things, and forever changed by using our intuition to guide us. I'm Adelina East, founder of Transformational Healing and mentor to those running soul-based businesses. Join me to receive transformational healing, tips to dive more deeply into your unique spiritual gifts, and to hear great conversations with other entrepreneurs in spirit. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cosmic Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Adelina East. I am an EMDR therapist, somatic experiencing therapist. I also use internal family systems and my own modality, transformational healing, to guide others towards healing themselves. Today is such an important episode. It is our 100th episode. Thank you so much for being here for all 100 episodes. I'm so grateful to you. I was looking through our catalog of episodes and just reflecting on how much this podcast has changed. I still will do solo episodes with transformational healing processes, but I love inviting cosmic leaders on to talk to all of you because every time we do something like that, I receive all of these DMs from you about how much you loved the conversation. So I'm going to ask you to please do me this favor. We have a giveaway going. I will be giving away one free session with me. You can choose what kind of session you would like to a lucky winner. All you need to do to enter the giveaway is to head over to Apple Podcasts, type in Cosmic Leadership. When the podcast comes up, hit subscribe, and then scroll to the bottom of the page and write me a review. This is how we attract new people for you to listen to, for you to learn from. And this also helps me so much because I know that I am making the content that you would like to hear, and it just helps me to know that we're on the right track with this podcast. So please do head over to enter the giveaway. I look forward to reading your comments on Apple Podcasts, and I can't wait to hear from you. Today is a special episode. We are going to be giving an encore listen to the episode about the Akashic Records and generational healing. As I was scrolling through former episodes, I saw the number of listens that each one has. This is one of our most listened to episodes. You all also loved the ones introducing the different star collectives and some more woo-woo topics, which we will also get into later this season. But I wanted to re-air this episode because so many of you wrote in and said that it was one of the most important parts of your healing journey. So all the way back from season 1, without any further ado, here is our episode on the Akashic Records and generational healing. Today's episode is going to be all about the differences between generational healing and the Akashic Records, and also the intersections, because whether we realize it or not, there is so much of our existence through the Akashic Records that is reliant on our generational past, on our generational traumas, and the healing of those things. So if all of this is brand new to you, do not worry about a thing. I will explain everything as we go. And I'm also going to share the ending of the story that I started in last week's podcast about my trip through the desert and all of the healing that happened there. So let's first talk about the Akashic Records. For those of you who are not in this community yet, or you're just joining our community now, this may be a new term for you. But basically what the Akashic Records are is the history of your soul. It's about where your soul began. So this is maybe when people talk about previous lifetimes, that's what they're referring to as the Akashic Record timeline there. And I use that word timeline very loosely because, we can get into a whole metaphysical debate about whether there is time, whether there isn't time, whether it's just a human conception. But let's just say for the time being and for learning purposes today, that time does exist. And so we as human beings, many of us have had previous lifetimes. I know that For example, and this is an example I give really often because I find it to be so cool. The people who tend to take my courses, like the ones who come back for each course as it's offered, they have all shared a previous lifetime. So their souls have taken on different incarnations in different time periods. And so myself and these people who I've found to be just my community, my soul sisters, we all were a part of this sort of agricultural group in the Scottish Highlands many, many years ago. And so many of us worked in the animal trade. There were some beautiful designers there who made clothes. There were people who introduced new modes of farming and animal care. And all of us were involved in this spiritual healing realm in some way in that previous lifetime. And so it's kind of cool when you start diving into your Akashic records, or maybe even into another person's Akashic records, to sort of see if, to see your previous lifetimes and what took place in them. Maybe there were some lessons that you learned in previous lifetimes that you can bring into today's current lifetime that will help you. Or are there things that you've brought into today's lifetime that maybe you've been working through for lots of different lifetimes in the past? And I will give you an example of this. So I was working with a client last week who has had money problems all of her life. And it's not for lack of anything. She was raised in a middle-class household. She was advantaged enough to go to college and to learn the things she needed to learn to be successful in the world. But since leaving home at 18, she's found that every step she takes just kind of drives her into a deeper and deeper financial hole. And she wasn't very sure why or what was happening that was making this continue to take place. And so some people will just say, oh, well, that's bad luck. Or maybe she's making decisions from a place of emotionality, or maybe it's just that things tend to happen to her. I don't really view the world that way. I do think that we all come into the world with certain lessons that we're supposed to learn. And lessons don't have to be hard or bad either. It can just be like, oh, I learned that today. But I do think that we come in with certain things that we have to learn. And so we can kind of decide how quickly we want to learn them, how slowly we want to learn them. I think there are some things that happen to us as human beings that are just totally terrible and not lessons at all. I've talked about this on this podcast before, but like institutional racism, sexual abuse, these things we did not create. We did not come in saying, oh, I think I'd like to learn about this. It's just the shit of the world, unfortunately. But I do think that we have, and of course, that's my opinion. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I do think that we do come in with certain lessons. So back to the example of this client, her finance thing, I was able to trace it back with the guides, with the masters, teachers, and loved ones of the Akashic Records to a previous lifetime where she had been treated really, really poorly. And it had taken quite a toll on her, and she'd been robbed many times, both in business and in life. And those things so deeply affected her soul that she hadn't been able to clear them over the years and over the different lifetimes. Now, I know this sounds very far out there for some of you. And please remember, I do have a neuroscience background, so I do know what that feels like to be hearing these kinds of things and be saying to yourself, oh, come on. However, I've been in practice 15 years, and I have to share with you, it is not all science, nor is it all spirituality. It is a combination of the two. And so I do deeply believe that these previous lifetimes were taking a toll on her, and that there was some part of her that was really resistant to learning whatever she was meant to learn in those previous lifetimes. And so we did some work on that. We did some brain retraining. We did some brain retraining on the traumas of this current lifetime that she's in now and her finances.
And wouldn't you know it, but a couple of days later, she received a new client that would pay her rent for 6 months. I kid you not. It was the most incredible thing. And so I have to encourage everybody to think about opening yourself up to your Akashic records, because finding out different things in your previous lifetimes and healing those things can greatly help you move ahead in this lifetime. So that's the Akashic records. It's the history of your soul's journey throughout different lifetimes. Sometimes your soul is a man, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's anything under the sun. So we can't hold too tightly to those sort of like details. We need to focus on the soul's journey and the soul's path in order to heal. So that's the Akashic Records piece. The other piece is generational healing. And I do this a lot with my clients as well. I personally can tell you that generational healing has been the thing that I have needed the most in the last few years. And I've found that once I started doing the generational healing work on myself, I kid you not, it literally did heal different generations of people in my family, or led them to dive into their own healing in a way that they hadn't before. And so this can also be really powerful. The reason I bring up generational healing is that my trip through the desert took place at a time when I needed so much of that, and I'm still needing more. And so I am going to spend more time out there. It's a kind of thing where, let's say, for example, I'll use myself as an example. My grandmother on my father's side was Native American. And, we all know what happened there. That's not a secret. And so, of course, there are generational things to be healed. She went through a lot of things that I haven't gone through. And it's not that I'm here to heal her things at all, but her things have affected me. And we can actually go back to something I spoke about in one of my YouTube videos lately, which is the FKBP. I'm going to say it incorrectly now. There's a certain genetic marker, and I'll look it up as I talk to you about it. There's a certain genetic marker that shows actually that if you have PTSD, it is fully possible that it was handed down to you from your parents. From your parents. How wild is that? These researchers found over time, and I will, of course, put this in the show notes, and I'll include the article in the show notes too, because I think it's important. And actually, this recording is not allowing me to minimize it, to look up the exact genetic mutation. Or I shouldn't say mutation, because that sounds like we're mutants. But this particular SNP in our genetic code, that when you have a father who has been through some sort of traumatic experience and they have post-traumatic stress disorder, you are twice as likely to also have post-traumatic stress from really anything at all. So let's say, for example, your father, I use this example in my YouTube video too. Let's say your father was locked in a closet rather frequently when he was quote unquote bad as a child. That trauma can be handed down to you genetically and can place you at a greater risk for having post-traumatic stress. Is that not wild? And so these things that we've been talking about in the spiritual community for years, generational healing, this is actually a scientific phenomenon now. So let's go back to the things that have worked over time to help us heal generationally, because clearly science is just sort of catching up to that now.
Have you ever felt that intuitive gut tingle where you just know something exciting is about to happen? It happens to me all the time. I feel as though there is this precipice that we're all standing on, where we are just on the verge of creating the lives that we really want. I created this free course, Harness Your Gifts, in order to tap into this energy. Over the course of 7 days, you will receive guided wisdom from me and my spirit guides in action form so that you can start to figure out what your individual spiritual gifts are. Once you have them, you always have them, and you can use them whenever you want to help you make decisions, to help you get clear, and to help you find your life purpose. And this course is totally free. You can join by clicking the link below. I look forward to hearing from you all about it.
As I was moving through the desert, as I was moving through healing some generational trauma, I found that, there's just so much there. It's not only the things that happened to my grandmother as a Native American woman, but it's deeper than that. It's this idea of home, which I talk about a whole lot here. I've taught courses that you can still find on my website about making sure that your home is within you, making sure that your home is not this exterior place with, couches and desks and kitchen tables, because those places can be taken away from us rather quickly. As I spoke about in the last episode, I have a condition called multiple chemical sensitivity and environmental illness. And basically what this means is it's just kind of hard to live in the world. You're sort of allergic to almost everything. And allergy is really too weak of a word for it. It's like, if I'm in mold for a few days, I just get incredibly sick. And so I've had to learn this the hard way, this, put your home inside you, because I've had to move a whole lot. Back when I worked for the United Nations, I moved a whole lot due to security situations. And then pretty much as soon as I got back to New York, I was always kind of on the move because of this illness. And so I've had to learn how to have home be wherever I am, wherever my people are, wherever I feel safe and comfortable. And that's usually within me. So all of this was sort of coming to a head on this trip. I decided to take this trip to suss out how I would feel in different places. And so I traveled through Arizona. I talked about that in the last episode. And then I traveled into New Mexico. My grandmother is actually from New Mexico. And so I was able to drive through a lot of the towns that she lived in. And as I was doing so, I was realizing that she was also always a person on the move. I know that she did have some symptoms of multiple chemical sensitivity. They didn't know what that was back then. But she did go through a 13-year battle with leukemia in her older years, which is very unusual. And leukemia and many types of cancer have been linked to mold. And so we know it was likely a problem for her. I'm not saying all cancer is mold related. I am, of course, not a cancer doctor, merely a neuroscientist, but there have been lots of studies that note that correlation and that actually go so far as to point out certain strains of mold as cancer-causing agents. And so I was realizing as I drove through the desert and drove through these different places that she had lived, through the reservation and through a couple of different cities that I knew she'd lived and raised her kids in, I was realizing how she probably also felt like it was hard to settle down anywhere, because you never know when that's going to be taken away from you, not only by, governments or people of a different ethnicity starting some kind of colonization process or war or what have you, but also by her health. And so I felt into that a bit while I was driving through. And I spoke about this in the last podcast too, but when I landed in Santa Fe, I just cried for days and days because it was a lot. Some happy crying, some sad crying, some healing crying. And one of the things that I found throughout all of that crying was that I was healing this on a very deep soul level. Not only was I healing it in the Akashic Records, because my soul has gone through many different lifetimes where home has been a problem, where home has not really been found. But I was also healing it generationally and seeing how in my lived line in this human being line of humans that I'm connected to, many have also not had homes. Many have also been displaced from whatever they were born into by various factors, often by war as well, on my mother's side. And so I took all of this in, and I worked with the masters, teachers, and loved ones of the Akashic Records to try to heal the things that had happened to my soul in previous lifetimes, things I had never seen before. Because our guides are always going to show us what we can handle, right? They're not going to show us every horrible thing that's ever happened to us in every 5,000 previous lifetimes all at once. We wouldn't be able to handle it. Even though we have strong souls, we still have human bodies, and every time the soul is affected, the body is affected too. And so they only show us things that we can handle at the right time. And that's often how you end up finding the person you're supposed to work with for your next phase of spiritual growth too, is that your soul kind of gives you this feeling about them. And you're like, yes, they can help me with this thing that I'm ready to heal. And you end up working with them then. So I ended up not only finding a new practitioner out in New Mexico that I loved working with. She's also a Native American woman, and she's very connected to my grandmother. But I also met a lot of other people that I felt like I'd known in so many previous lifetimes. I've never made friends so quickly since leaving the UN. Like, one of the beautiful things about making new friends quickly is that you kind of form that community, that sense of home where you are, which I have to say, I don't think I've really had in a long time. And so it was beautiful to make these new friends and to feel this universal support around me in New Mexico, and to feel how the trip was moving forward and how I was meeting at every step, at every place in the trip, I met someone new who would point me in a new direction to where I needed to be for some reason. So I just, again, relied on that beautiful universal support that I experienced so much through Arizona as well. I relied on the kindness of strangers. Yes, I did have many more car problems while I was there. And it was just sort of unreal. But what eventually happened was that my car wouldn't go. And so I ended up staying in New Mexico for an extra week, which was so much fun. And I had so much fun with the new people that I had met. And I had time to really do the healing work that I knew I needed to do. And so I wanted to share with you this intersection between the Akashic Records and generational healing, because I think it's so special. I don't think many people are doing it right now, and I think we need to be. And so my session work for the next several months, or as long as Source tells me it should be, is going to be involving this. We'll still do brain retraining, of course, for success, for finances, for whatever you need. But as we do that, I'm going to incorporate some more of these new generational healing processes that I learned while I was in New Mexico, because it's been so helpful for me. Certain blocks that I had for years and years and years just lifted pretty quickly. And so I really want to share this with all of you. So if you want to experience this kind of healing as well, you can just head over to my website and book a regular session. It will be incorporated into it.
Welcome home. In this podcast, we venture into what it means to be a leader in this new world. Human, flawed but working on things, and forever changed by using our intuition to guide us. I'm Adelina East, founder of Transformational Healing and mentor to those running soul-based businesses. Join me to receive transformational healing, tips to dive more deeply into your unique spiritual gifts, and to hear great conversations with other entrepreneurs in spirit. Let's get started.